Walk through Lyon today, and you're in France's third largest city. Glass office towers line the banks of the Rhine. The Part-Dieu business district rises like a modern city within a city. 2 million people live in the metropolitan area. Tourists photograph the UNESCO-listed Old Town, the Basilica of Notre Dame de Fourvière perched on a hill, and the rivers that meet in the heart of the city, but stand on the Fourvière hill overlooking Lyon and look down at the confluence of the Rhine and Seine rivers. And you're standing on the site of one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. Lugdunum, capital of Gaul, seat of the Imperial mint that produced coins for the entire Western Empire. The city where 4 major Roman roads began, connecting Gaul to Italy, Germania, and the Atlantic coast. A metropolis of perhaps 50,000 to 80,000 people at its height in the 2nd century AD. Almost nothing of it is visible today. No standing temples, no intact forums, no complete amphitheater like the Colosseum. Roman Lugdunum was so thoroughly built over, torn down, and buried that modern Lyon barely hints at the city beneath. This is the story of what stood here when Rome ruled Gaul, the capital that has almost vanished. The founding and strategic importance. To understand Lugdunum's importance, you must understand why Rome built a city here. In 43 BC, Lucius Munatius Plancus, a Roman governor and general, founded the colony of Lugdunum on Fourvière Hill. The site was not chosen randomly. It occupied the confluence of 2 of Gaul's most important rivers, the Rhine flowing down from the Alps and Lake Geneva toward the Mediterranean, and the Seine flowing from the northeast. This confluence made Lugdunum a natural hub for trade, transportation, and military logistics. Goods and troops could move by river in multiple directions. The elevated position on Fourvière Hill provided defensive advantages, overlooking the river junction below, but geography alone doesn't explain Lugdunum's rise. In 27 BC, Emperor Augustus reorganized Gaul into provinces. Lugdunum became the capital of Gallia Lugdunensis, one of the 3 Gauls Tres Gallia. More importantly, it became the administrative center for all 3 Gallic provinces, Lugdunensis, Aquitania, and Belgica. This political decision transformed Lugdunum from a colony into an imperial capital. The governor of Lugdunensis resided here. Imperial officials administered the vast territory of Gaul from this city. The provincial council of the 3 Gauls, the Concilium Galliarum, met annually at Lugdunum to conduct religious ceremonies, discuss provincial matters, and demonstrate loyalty to Rome. The city's strategic road network amplified its importance. 4 major Roman roads radiated from Lugdunum, the Via Agrippa north to the Rhine frontier and Germania, the road southeast through the Alps to Italy, the road west to Aquitania and the Atlantic coast, the road northeast toward Belgica and the northern frontiers. Lugdunum was not just at the center of Gaul geographically, it was the hub of Roman control over this vast, recently conquered territory. Urban layout: 3 cities in 1. Roman Lugdunum was not a single unified city, but 3 distinct areas developing over time, each with its own character. The original colony occupied Fourvière Hill, the elevated plateau rising 100 meters above the rivers. This area, the Colonia proper, was the administrative and religious heart. Here stood the forum, the temples, the basilica for legal proceedings, and the governor's residence. The streets followed a rough grid pattern typical of Roman urban planning, though adapted to the hilly terrain. At the base of Fourvière Hill, in the low-lying area between the hill and the Seine River, a commercial district called Condate developed. This was the port area, the warehouse district, the merchant quarter. Docks lined the Seine. Warehouses stored goods moving up and down the river. Markets sold local and imported products. Workshops produced goods for trade. Across the Seine River on the Croix-Rousse Hill, second elevated area, another settlement grew. This was Cannabis, a civil settlement that developed alongside the city proper, home to merchants, craftsmen, and others serving the colonial economy. The area had a more organic, less planned development than the Colonia on Fourvière. These 3 zones: the colonial city on Fourvière, the commercial port of Condé, and the settlement on Croix Rousse formed Greater Lugdunum. Bridges connected the districts across the Seine. Roads climbed the hills from the riverside commercial areas to the elevated colonial center. The city sprawled across perhaps 200 hectares at its maximum extent, though not all of this was densely built. Population estimates for Lugdunum's peak in the 2nd century AD range from 50,000 to 80,000 inhabitants, making it one of the largest cities in Gaul, and among the significant urban centers of the Western Roman Empire. Architecture and monuments. The architecture of Roman Lugdunum combined grandeur and function, typical of major Roman provincial capitals. On Fourviere Hill stood the Forum, the political, religious, and commercial center. This large paved plaza, surrounded by colonnaded porticos, served as the gathering place for public assemblies, markets, and civic ceremonies. While the exact dimensions are not fully known due to limited archaeological remains, forums in cities of Lugdunum's importance typically measured 100 by 50 meters or larger. Adjacent to the Forum was the Basilica, a large rectangular hall used for legal proceedings, business transactions, and official gatherings. These buildings featured high ceilings, multiple aisles separated by columns, and were among the most impressive architectural spaces in any Roman city. Temples dominated the religious landscape. The most important was the Temple of Rome and Augustus, built in 12 BC. This provincial imperial cult temple stood on the Confluence Peninsula at Condé, marking the spot where the Rhine and Seine met. The temple was monumental. Archaeological evidence suggests it was approximately 40 meters long and served as the religious center for the imperial cult in the Three Gauls. Each year, representatives from the Gallic provinces gathered here for ceremonies honoring Rome and the emperor. Two theaters stood on the slopes of Fourviere Hill. The larger theater, built during the reign of Augustus and expanded under Hadrian, could seat approximately 10,000 spectators. Its cavea, the semicircular seating area, was carved into the hillside, taking advantage of the natural slope. Adjacent to it was a smaller Odeon, seating around 3,000, used for musical performances, poetry recitations, and smaller gatherings. An amphitheater stood on Croix Rousse Hill. Built in the 1st century AD, it could accommodate approximately 20,000 spectators for gladiatorial games, wild animal hunts, and public executions. The structure was substantial, roughly 140 meters long and 117 meters wide, though smaller than the great amphitheaters of Rome, Enmes, or Arles. Aqueducts supplied the city with fresh water from sources in the surrounding hills. 4 major aqueducts have been identified, bringing water from distances of 20 to 75 kilometers. The longest and most impressive was the Gers Aqueduct, which carried water approximately 75 kilometers from springs in the Pilote Mountains. These aqueducts fed public fountains, baths, private homes of the wealthy, and the various industries requiring water. Public baths were essential to Roman urban life. Lugdunum had multiple bath complexes, though their exact locations and sizes are not fully known due to limited archaeological evidence. Baths provided hygiene, exercise, socialization, and were among the most frequented public buildings in any Roman city. The city's buildings were constructed primarily from local limestone, with decorative elements in marble imported from Italy or Greece. Roofs were tiled with terracotta. Floors in wealthy homes and public buildings featured mosaics, decorative patterns made from small colored stone pieces. Walls were plastered and painted with frescoes. The Imperial Mint. Economic power. Lugdunum's greatest economic and political significance came from the Imperial Mint established here. In 15 BC, Emperor Augustus established a mint at Lugdunum that would become one of the most important in the Roman Empire. For the next 250 years, this mint produced gold and silver coinage for the western provinces Gaul, Hispania, and later Germania and Britannia. The mint's output was enormous. During the reign of Augustus, the Lugdunum mint produced the vast majority of the empire's gold ore and silver denarii circulating in the west. Coins minted here bore the legends and images chosen by the emperor: portraits, deities, military victories, and propaganda messages. The mint employed skilled artisans, die cutters, who carved the coin designs, metalworkers who prepared the blanks, strikers who hammered the coins, and administrators who managed quality and output. The presence of the mint attracted bankers, money changers, and merchants who dealt in precious metals. The economic impact was profound. Lugdunum had direct access to imperial precious metal supplies. The mint required security. Military guards protected the bullion and finished coins. The flow of metal through the city created financial services industries. Wealthy individuals and institutions could convert bullion into coin or vice versa. The mint's presence also signified political trust. The emperor entrusted Lugdunum with the production of the currency that funded the legions, paid officials, and facilitated trade across the Western Empire. This was power of the first order. The mint operated until approximately 258 AD, when production ceased, possibly due to political instability during the crisis of the 3rd century. Its closure marked a turning point in Lugdunum's decline. Trade and commerce. Lugdunum's position at the confluence of the Rhine and Seine made it one of Gaul's premier commercial centers. The rivers served as highways. Boats moved up the Seine from the south, carrying wine, olive oil, pottery, and luxury goods from the Mediterranean. Ships descended from the north, bringing grain, timber, and metals from the interior of Gaul. The Rhine connected Lugdunum to the great port of Massilia, Marseille, and beyond to the Mediterranean trade networks. The roads brought overland trade. Merchants traveled the Via Agrippa, carrying goods between the Rhine frontier and the Mediterranean. Trade with Italy moved through the Alpine passes. Atlantic products, British tin, Gallic salt, fish reached Lugdunum via western roads. Local industries thrived. Pottery workshops in and around Lugdunum produced terra sigillata, the red glazed tableware that was standard across the Roman world. These workshops exported their products throughout Gaul and beyond. Metalworking produced tools, weapons, and decorative items. Textile production processed wool and linen. Leatherworking produced shoes, clothing, and military equipment. The markets of Condé, the commercial district at the base of Fourviere Hill, were centers of exchange. Covered market buildings Masella provided permanent stalls for vendors. Open-air markets filled plazas on market days. Warehouses Horia stored grain, wine, and other bulk goods. Trade guilds Collegia organized merchants and craftsmen by profession. These associations regulated trade, set standards, provided mutual support, and held social and religious gatherings. Being a member of a guild conferred status and business advantages. Slavery was part of the economic system. Slaves worked in workshops, served in wealthy households, labored on construction projects, and performed the heavy manual work that sustained urban life. The slave market at Lugdunum supplied labor for the region. Population and social structure. Lugdunum's population of 50,000 to 80,000 at its peak was stratified by legal status, wealth, and origin. At the apex stood Roman citizens, individuals with full legal rights under Roman law. These included the governor and imperial officials who administered the 3 Gauls. Military officers and veterans settled in the colony. Wealthy merchants and landowners, descendants of the original colonial settlers. Below citizens in legal status were Latins, inhabitants of Gaul who had been granted Latin rights Latinitas, which gave them some but not all privileges of citizenship. Many could become full citizens through holding local office or military service. The free non-citizen population included merchants, craftsmen, and laborers from across Gaul and beyond who had migrated to Lugdunum for economic opportunity. These peregrini foreigners had legal protections, but not the full rights of citizens. Freedmen, former slaves who had been manumitted, formed another distinct class. They often continued to work for their former masters but were legally free, and could own property and conduct business. Slaves formed the bottom of the social hierarchy. They had no legal rights and were considered property. Estimates suggest slaves might have constituted 15 to 25% of the urban population, though exact numbers are impossible to determine. Women's status depended entirely on their family's position. Elite women could wield informal influence through male relatives, manage household estates, and engage in religious activities, but they had no formal political power. Women from lower classes worked in markets, textile production, and service industries. The Gallic aristocracy, the tribal elites who had controlled pre-Roman Gaul, had been integrated into Roman society. Many had received citizenship, Romanized their names, and participated in Roman administration. They maintained wealth through land ownership and held positions in the provincial council. Daily life in Lugdunum followed rhythms common to Roman cities, but with local variations. Most people woke at dawn. The day began with a simple breakfast, bread dipped in wine or oil, perhaps some cheese or fruit. Water came from public fountains supplied by the aqueducts. Only wealthy homes had private water connections. For working people, the day meant labor. Craftsmen opened workshops, merchants set up stalls, laborers reported to construction sites or docks. Work continued until midday when the heat made outdoor labor difficult. The main meal cena was eaten in the afternoon. For common people, this meant bread, porridge, vegetables, cabbage, turnips, onions, legumes, beans, lentils, and occasionally fish or cheap cuts of meat. Wine was diluted with water. The wealthy ate richer foods, meat, game, imported delicacies, fine wine, elaborate dishes prepared by enslaved cooks. Public baths opened in the afternoon and were the social center of Roman life. Men and women at separate times bathed, exercised in gymnasiums, conversed, and conducted business. The bathing ritual moved through progressively hotter rooms, the tepidarium warm, caldarium hot, and back to the frigidarium cold plunge pool. Entertainment included theater performances, gladiatorial games in the amphitheater, and chariot racing, though Lugdunum's racing facilities are not well documented. Religious festivals, honoring Roman gods and the imperial cult, provided communal celebrations. Housing varied dramatically by class. The wealthy lived in domus, private houses with multiple rooms arranged around an atrium, central courtyard, and peristyle columned garden. These homes had running water, latrines, decorated floors and walls, and private dining spaces. Most people lived in insulae, multi-story apartment blocks. These buildings were crowded, had minimal amenities, and were prone to collapse and fire. Residents might rent a single room or small apartment, sharing communal facilities. Streets were paved with stone, but were noisy, crowded, and smelled of animals, cooking fires, and human waste. Wagons could not enter the city during daylight hours, so heavy goods were moved at night, creating nocturnal noise. Religion and the imperial cult. Religion in Roman Lugdunum was a complex mixture of Roman official cults, local Gallic deities, and imported Eastern religions. The imperial cult, the worship of Rome and the living emperor, was the most important official religion. The altar of Rome and Augustus, established in 12 BC, was the focus of this cult. Each year on August 1st, representatives from the 60 Gallic tribes gathered at the altar for ceremonies, sacrifices, and oaths of loyalty. The priest of the three Gauls, elected from the provincial aristocracy, presided over these ceremonies. Traditional Roman gods were worshipped in temples throughout the city. Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, the Capitoline triad, received official veneration. Mars, the god of war, was particularly important in this military-oriented society. Mercury, god of commerce, was popular among merchants. Local Gallic deities were syncretized with Roman gods. The Gallic god Lugus, from whom Lugdunum derived its name, was identified with Mercury. Other Celtic gods continued to be worshipped under Romanized forms. Mystery cults from the Eastern Mediterranean gained followers. The worship of Cybele, the Great Mother from Anatolia, was established in Lugdunum. Mithraism, a mystery religion centered on the god Mithras, attracted military personnel and merchants. Evidence of Isis worship, imported from Egypt, has also been found. Christianity reached Lugdunum by the mid-2nd century AD. The Christian community was small and initially persecuted. In 177 AD, violent persecution occurred in Lugdunum. The martyrdom of Blandina and other Christians was documented in a letter preserved by the church historian Eusebius. Despite persecution, Christianity grew slowly, eventually becoming the dominant religion after Constantine's conversion in the early 4th century. Religious life was public and civic. Participation in sacrifices, festivals, and processions was expected of citizens. Religion reinforced social hierarchy, political loyalty, and communal identity. Decline and transformation. Lugdunum's peak lasted roughly from the 1st to mid-3rd centuries AD. Decline came gradually, then catastrophically. In 197 AD, the city suffered a major blow. During the civil war between rival emperors Septimius Severus and Clodius Albinus, Lugdunum supported Albinus. When Severus won, his forces sacked the city in punishment. Historical sources suggest extensive destruction, though the exact extent is debated. The city recovered partially but never fully regained its former prominence. The Imperial Mint closed around 258 AD. Political instability during the crisis of the 3rd century to 35284 AD disrupted trade and administration. By the late 3rd century, the Roman Empire's focus had shifted. Constantine established new capitals, first Trier, then Constantinople. Lugdunum became a provincial backwater rather than an imperial center. The city contracted. The population abandoned the hills and concentrated in the low-lying areas near the rivers. Buildings were not maintained. Monuments fell into disrepair. Stone was scavenged for new construction. Christian Lugdunum emerged in the 4th and 5th centuries. Churches replaced pagan temples. Bishops became the primary authority as Roman civil administration weakened. The amphitheater and theaters fell out of use as Christian authorities condemned pagan entertainments. When the Burgundians, a Germanic people, established their kingdom in the 5th century, they made Lugdunum, now called Lyon, their capital. But the city they ruled was a shadow of Roman grandeur, a Christian episcopal center built from the ruins of Imperial Lugdunum. Why so little survives? Unlike Pompeii, frozen in time, or Rome, where monuments still stand, almost nothing of Roman Lugdunum is visible above ground today. Why? Continuous occupation destroyed the Roman city. Lyon never was abandoned. Medieval, Renaissance, and modern Lyon built directly on top of Roman Lugdunum. Every new generation cannibalized the structures of the past for building materials. The theaters on Forvire Hill survived partially because they were carved into the hillside and were difficult to completely demolish. Even so, they were quarried for stone and partially buried. They weren't excavated and restored until the 20th century. The amphitheater on Croix-Rousse was completely demolished, its stones used for other construction. Only its location is known from archaeological excavation. The Forum, Basilica, temples, almost all vanished. Their foundations lie beneath modern buildings and streets. Excavation is nearly impossible without destroying occupied structures. The aqueducts were broken when maintenance ceased. Their arches were dismantled for stone. Only scattered sections survive, often incorporated into later structures. Lyon's strategic importance ensured continuous development. The rivers, roads, and geographic position that made Lugdunum important made Lyon equally vital. Each era built on the ruins of the previous one. Archaeological excavation in the 19th and 20th centuries recovered fragment sections of mosaic floors, inscriptions, pottery, coins, sections of buildings. Museums display these remnants. But walking through modern Lyon, you would not know that one of the Roman Empire's great cities once stood here. The invisible capital. Modern Lyon is a prosperous, modern city of glass and steel, historic silk weaving districts, and Michelin-starred restaurants. It is France's gastronomic capital, UNESCO World Heritage Site, a technology hub. But beneath the pavement, buried under buildings, preserved in museums and scattered ruins, lies Lugdunum, capital of Roman Gaul, home to the Imperial Mint, hub of roads and rivers, a city of 50,000 to 80,000 people living in a fully functioning Roman metropolis. Standing on Forvire Hill today, you can visit the partially reconstructed Roman theaters. A small museum displays artifacts. Information panels explain what stood here, but it requires historical imagination to see the Forum, the temples, the colonnaded streets, the aqueducts bringing water from distant mountains, the port crowded with boats, the amphitheater filled with 20,000 spectators. Roman Lugdunum was not a marginal outpost, but a major imperial city, more important than many places that left more visible remains. Its invisibility today is not a reflection of its ancient insignificance, but a testament to the continuity of urban life. The city was too valuable to abandon, so each generation built on the ruins of the last. The streets of Roman Lyon, the Via Agrippa leading north, the docks on the Seine, the climb up Fourviere Hill to the Forum and temples are gone, but they determine the layout of modern Lyon. The roads still follow Roman routes. The rivers still meet where they always did. The hills still rise above the confluence. Lugdunum vanished as a physical city, but as a geographic and strategic reality, it never died. It transformed into Lyon, carrying forward the advantages of position that made the Romans build a capital here 2,000 years ago.